Okay, so let's preview. I'm just moving my camera around real quick. Goodness, so many windows. Oh my gosh. Okay, there we go. So let's go ahead and preview what we're talking about today. So the goal of the homework assignment, okay, LJ, I see your comment. Thank you so much. The goal of this homework assignment is that for our second week or our second unit, we're going to be making a head, like a drawing of a head. And it uses, of course, a lot of the information from last time, specifically that workflow we talked about. And then from there, we're going to add on to today, like a lot of drawing info. So some stuff to kind of help you out with drawing character heads. You can do something more realistic, but we actually encourage if you want to make it a little bit more like simple, kind of stylized. And I do have some student homework that I'll show later on from last term to give you some examples of how your assignment could look. So to give you a quick preview, first we'll talk about the basic structure of drawing a head. Then we will talk about a little bit about proportion, some stuff to help you out with giving realistic proportion to your head drawings. A little bit about features. We will touch on skin tone, specifically the characteristics of skin tone, and this includes a couple of new vocabulary words that we'll learn today. There's some steps for the homework. This is more like homework stuff that you'll use later on, some features that'll help you out. And then I will actually talk about a little bit about hair, because of course that's important, but it's also a deeper lesson that we'll talk about later on, so I'll just kind of touch on it. And then to wrap it up, I will, if I have time, do a very quick demonstration of drawing a head in profile. Because you're drawing for your homework largely something that's kind of front facing, but we'll give you some tips on drawing in profile as well. Benson asks, will this assignment have to be human heads? Yeah, I will. Like as human as possible. You know, like obviously you can bend that a little bit since it's kind of an invented head. But yeah, right now I'd say no like animals or anything, just because we want to see your proportions, like how your handling of human proportion. So yeah, we'll talk about some profile stuff too if we have time. But let's jump right into it. We'll do some lecture. We'll do some drawing, of course. We'll take a break about halfway to chit chat with you, say hi, and then we'll get to that homework towards the end of class. Let me just grab a brush real fast. Okay. So for some of you guys, this is old hat. It's always good to review. To give you a kind of an anecdote, I've been drawing right forever, like for probably twice as long as you've even walked the earth. And I still draw heads this year and like 2022, right? And make like adjustments where I'm like, oh, turns out like I wasn't really drawing this part of the head very well, and I need to like adjust the way I think about it. And so you can never get enough reps about this kind of stuff, like drawing heads. So the evolution of drawing a head, especially for some of you that are a little bit beginner, you're kind of starting off with drawing, I'll do this very fast, is we start out drawing heads like this. As we always say, this is cool. This is a symbol. It's definitely useful. Then we kind of evolve to this. We draw like an egg, right? Definitely getting better. We'll say better. But today, of course, we're going to teach you the very well-known, famous, especially from these art classes, method, which is not the circle, not the egg, but what we would call the ball and the jaw. The reason that we draw a head like this is that it is our structure, something like it's the setup for our head. It's more realistic, and then it actually deals with something that, as a person who does figure drawing, I teach a lot of figure drawing classes, something I'm pretty obsessed with, which is what I call like moving parts, I mean like the true like pieces of a head, which of course would be like your cranium, like the top of your head and your skull. So when we draw heads, when we talk about drawing heads, we want to get really obsessed with this idea of the ball and jaw. And so the steps for that, slowed down, or of course more specifically, would be we draw a ball. You can't see my hand right now, like even on the little camera. I don't know if I could like tilt it down a little bit. Maybe you can see my hand now on the tablet a bit. One thing I do, like both on paper and on tablet, if you can see my tiny camera here, actually I'll cut away for a second, is I do sort of like ghost. So I know this is all black, you can't like see anything, but I kind of like ghost the circle before I draw it. And you'll also notice a big thing that I do, even when I'm drawing on a tablet, like drawing on a computer. Orion, I see your message. Thank you for that. And same for Archie, I see your message. Thank you. Even when I'm drawing the computer, I don't draw like this. I don't draw with what I call a handwriting hand, where I just use my wrist. I use like my whole arm when I'm drawing. So when we're doing that stuff for the circle and the ball and jaw, we want to make sure like we're really engaging that arm and elbow so that we can get a nice circle. So if you look on the tiny camera for one more time while you see the screen, I'm actually kind of like pretending to draw that circle. I'm sort of like ghosting it, as I would say, and then I lay it down. And of course, this stuff's all like sketching the head, like just starting with the basic shapes. So if you do stuff like this, which some of you do, you kind of like do what we call like searching. You kind of like search for the shape or you sort of draw like a lot of circles. That's not really a bad thing. I would just say from my experience that in the future, you might find like that's a lot of like lines. Like if you're kind of doing stuff like this where you're like really scratching stuff out. But people do it. And again, we would call this kind of like searching. Searching. So, but other than that, the basic etiquette would be when we draw a head, we draw the ball, we draw where the figure's looking, and then we draw a jaw. So that's a circle shape, and then kind of like a letter U shape right down here on the bottom. So we get into that flow where we get very comfortable with that. Draw a ball, where the figure's looking, draw the jaw. We'll touch a little bit today on stuff like this. Draw a ball, a little bit flatter, where the figure's looking, maybe to the side, draw a jaw. Draw the ball, maybe the figure of the character's looking 3/4 is what we call this, meaning like they're turned a little bit, draw the jaw. The other reason this is really important is because when we're drawing characters at different angles, we're drawing heads at different angles, these original shapes really backfire on us. So for instance, if I gave you a piece of paper right now, like white paper and a Sharpie, and I said, hey, I want you to draw someone looking to the side, like all the way to the left or right. A lot of you, which is okay, would do something like this. You kind of draw like an oval. You might draw like a nose and a person like this. And as I always say, yeah, it's funny. I like it. It gives me a laugh. But it's definitely really failing you, right, in terms of like structure. And that's because you're doing that egg or oval thing. So what we're teaching you is ball and jaw is awesome for drawing heads, and it's especially useful when you're drawing stuff at different angles. When you start to draw people turning their heads. And all this combined, which is like something you could stamp on my forehead, right, is structure, which means you're drawing like the basic underlying shapes before you draw like all the big stuff. And of course, if you remember last week with the eye, this is like our sketch stage. It's drawing this ball and jaw, thinking about this structure. So again, real comfortable, draw a ball, where the figure's looking. We'll do a lot of stuff today. It's just facing the front, especially for those of you that are starting out. Draw the ball where the figure's facing from the front, and then draw a jaw. And we'll talk right now about how these things are sized. So this is a great structure, this ball and jaw, and of course it's great to turn the head as well. So now let's go ahead and add on to this. So the big thing, of course, to add on to this would be proportion, right? Sizing. And so I'm going to give you some basic proportion, and I'm even going to tell you an idea that I find extremely advanced. I mean, like, this is the thing I was joking about or saying at the beginning of class, where I think it literally took me like 30 years to like get this part right or think about this part in a better way. So you draw that circle, you draw where it's looking, you draw that jaw. Right away, you should have tons of questions about how far down does this go? How big is this circle? Where does this line begin, right, for where the person's looking? Like, you know, give me some stuff, as you would say. Like, give me, like, I need to know the answers to all these things. And I actually work that way a lot myself. Like, I want to know the reasons why. So here's some background info on this whole shape. Draw the circle, right? It took me an extremely long time to figure out an exact measurement for this line, to think of like how big or how long do I want this line to be? And the best way to describe it to you would be, especially as a beginner and even as someone advanced, draw that ball and just imagine, don't draw a line or anything, but just imagine like about halfway on that ball. That's where you're basically starting that looking line. And then you're actually just sort of mirroring or duplicating it. And that gives you a really nice size for the head. Really nice size for how long that is. Now, some people draw this in an arbitrary way. Arbitrary, of course, just means like without like a definite reason. So they'll just do something like this. They'll just draw like that circle. They don't really think about where that line goes. But as a person that like really always wants the answer, wants something that's like really concrete, right? This would be the idea. Draw that circle. Think about like halfway on that ball, draw that line, and then just sort of mirror that line again. And that gives you a good idea for the jaw. Now let's add one or two very important proportions. These are all for a realistic head. And admittedly, these are for what we call like an adult head. But what's cool is that for most of you who are 13, possibly even like 12, you're actually largely this proportion. You just end up getting taller and stuff. But by the time you're like 13, your face is basically the same proportion as an adult. Even like your shoe size, honestly, like by the time you're like 13, 14, your shoe size is like really settled in and stuff. So you might get taller, but you're kind of like the proportion largely of an adult. So we can apply this to both adult characters and even like teen characters and stuff like that. So we draw that circle where the figure's looking and the jaw. So the most basic proportion is from your chin to the top of your head, about halfway on your head is where your eyes would go. There's a lot of very specific language in that, especially the term about. One of the worst things you can do is draw stuff like it's a calculator, like meaning, oh yeah, get a ruler out or like measure it or like, draw a line like this and make sure it's equal. We don't want you to do any of that. This stuff's very serious. This is actually like medical canon, like medical science of how your skull is proportioned. But don't ever get like numbers and stuff involved. That totally freezes up the process of drawing. So as long as it's about halfway, that's where your eyes are. Sometimes this is really confusing for students because they think, no way, that seems like really low or even like maybe high or something. They don't quite understand it. And what you have to consider as a student, as someone learning art, is that there's a difference between, if this was your hair, right, like your hairline, here's halfway. There's a difference between what we'd call your face, which is basically like where your hairline starts, like your forehead, right, where your hair is starting to your chin. There's a difference between your face and then what's literally the top of your head, like the exact top center of your head if you tapped it on there. So that's where we get that proportion, is that it's halfway on our human skull, halfway on our human head. Like anyone who's normal, you have a head, of course, on your desk, and so it's a little bit like overexposed, but this is like a pretty good proportional example where you can see that halfway. So you can see from chin to the very top of the head, about halfway is where those eyes will start. Again, if you're like me and you really like think a lot about this stuff, you're like, hey, where exactly on the eyes? Again, don't sweat it too much. What helps me about like the halfway point is that's usually where I put the corner of the eye, at about halfway. So here's that short, long we talked about. So that's one of the most important proportions, and a very agreed upon one, meaning like scientifically. Now, do people have different proportions? Like, why does my face look different than your face, so on and so forth? We do, but barely, because we all largely have the same skull. We just have different shapes, different nose shape, different eye shape, different jawline, things like that. But your skull and my skull, again, especially with yours growing, etc., they're largely the same thing. So that's why we'd say this is pretty reliable stuff. Eyes are halfway. Now, there's a couple of different ways you can do the rest of the features, but a general rule would be that wherever your eyes are, from there to your chin, this is another average, like mean, just kind of about halfway down is where your nose would be. And I usually like to think of it as like the bottom of the nose, something like kind of like where the nostrils would be. We'll do some nicer shapes in a little bit. So right now we're just kind of figuring out sizing. So you have your eyes, you have your nose, and then the last one, and this is like another, again, average kind of idea, is you might be seeing a pattern. Like my eyes are halfway, my nose is about halfway down. So I bet like my mouth is halfway down. And it's not the truth. And it's actually something I see a lot in student work, which is sometimes people tend to put the mouth a little bit low. That makes so much sense because our brain naturally just wants to like stamp things in pattern. Like our brain wants to go like even, even, or even, even, even. We want to like cut things in half. It's hard to do something different as a human. But what we want to think about is we're not halfway down with that mouth. The real math or like the real number is that it's about a third of the way is where your lips would be. Specifically, what we call your lip line, something like the actual opening of your mouth. It's like about a third of the way there. So then from there, there's actually tons of like really cool little tricks and gimmicks about the face proportionally. You know, even stuff I'm not going to put on here formally, but like how your tear duct lines up with your nostril, your pupil kind of lines up with the corner of your mouth. Those are cool things. But the last one that matters would be for your face, which is like facing straight forward, not really like up or down tilting. From the bottom of your nose, that's about where your ear starts. And then as long as your ear is like about around your eyebrow, it's definitely not higher, doesn't really get like any bigger, but it's definitely not as low as your eye. So I mean, like it doesn't look like this. This is a little bit too small. So it's about from your nose to your eyebrow is your ear. Again, this would be for someone who's completely looking forward. As soon as you start messing with this stuff, like you get into this kind of info, you'll see the power of even something like ears, because ears do things like this. If you draw someone, and I just told you that your ear is about the bottom of your nose. So here's like someone's nose. If you see something like this, where the ear is a lot higher, here's the mouth. You would say, hey man, you're totally wrong. That ear is like actually in the bridge and that ear is like way higher than the eyebrow. And what's happening is that's what happens when we tilt our head. When we tilt our head down, if you see me on the little camera, our ears get a lot higher than everything if we draw a line across. If we tilt our head up, our ear gets a lot lower than everything, right? If we do this, and we'll do a little just simple person, and we're looking up, here's a little chin, then our ear gets a lot lower because we're looking up. I think I actually have, oh, here we go. I'm drawing a background right now, and we're looking like under everyone in this character shot, and you can see this exact thing, where the ear is actually much lower. So the top of the ear is practically with the nose. And again, this is your cue that you are looking up at someone or that they are looking up, like they're turning their head up. So the long story short would be these proportions not only help you with size, but eventually they are your immediate clue for perspective, like why someone's head is behaving the way it is. So to kind of do that whole run of proportion, a little simpler, a little quicker, when you draw a head, especially from the front, you'd say ball, where the figure's looking, jaw. You'd say from the top to the bottom, about halfway is the eyes. If you guys like art, you watch like YouTube and stuff, as you should, or look at Pinterest, you might see people do things like this, like draw a whole line across for where the eyes are. I'm actually not a big fan of that because I think it sort of like flattens that shape. And so I tend to do a thing almost like a pair of glasses. Imagine like this is the nose piece of glasses. And it's kind of like connecting your sockets. So I just draw a little line like that across for where those eyes are. So your eyes are halfway. Your eyebrow, we don't really have a good measurement for this because it's quite different from person to person. And when we speak to what we refer to as like male and female skeleton, like male and female biology of your bones, women actually have a little bit of a rounder socket. So what you'll see with the female skeleton is that the eyebrow is actually a little bit higher. Men have more of a square kind of box socket in their skull. So their socket looks more like this. And so that's why the eyebrows a little bit lower on men. And when you get into character design, this is amazing, or like this is so cool, because then even something as simple as this, higher eyebrow, lower eyebrow, says a lot about the characters, not only like biology, but even just a little bit of like their narrative, right? Is this character more like effeminate, softer, possibly more appealing? Is this character a little bit more neutral, or kind of like even like harder in shape language? And what does that speak to in the story? So there's no measurement again for eyebrows. They really do go over your eyes. It's going to vary person to person. Then you draw your nose, or place your nose. And then again, what we call your lip line. Your ears start from the bottom of your nose. They're about where your brow is. And then the last couple of small details, and then we'll show some of this feature stuff. We'll talk more about features. Would be, we do draw a ball. That's important. Your skull or your head is like a circle or a sphere. But what you'll notice on your skull, again, every normal human being has skulls on their desk. What you'll notice is that it's kind of like flat on the sides. So it's actually kind of like, imagine cutting like an orange or something. There's like a slice taken off. You can see that yourself. You can feel it. You can actually imagine like rubbing your forehead, and then you see this really sharp turn, this like really sharp cut in your head. And so it's a little bit flatter on the sides. So when you draw these characters, these heads, you will notice that you can kind of cut the side down a little bit flatter for realism. And again, this is a lot like a kind of like cutting a slice out of a fruit, of an orange. So it's a little bit flatter, right? In terms of a neck, our necks are, of course, the same biology, but the truth is that your neck actually connects behind your ear. So if you were to like rub your neck and you're like, oh, my neck hurts, you're just rubbing it, you have like these two big, almost like ropes on the side of your neck. And so what that means is that your neck largely just kind of comes from the jawline right here, sort of just like smoothly comes out from the jaw. So this like boring, dull head that we'd like to think has some decent proportion or is not bad, this is just what we call like the mannequin head. Or you could just call it like boring head, right? Like this is boring head. And one of the goals that you want as an artist is like you need your version of this. You can of course like look at the ones on the handouts, you can do anything you want from what you see online, but you like comfortably need this like boring head. It's the very reason that when you go and draw characters like this, you can start to change their shapes, like their jawline, their eye line, or their eye shape, even like ears, things like that, right? It's because you have this like basic head that you then riff on, you like manipulate. And that's how you make people look different, because they all have like the same structure, same ball and jaw, same start, but you kind of shift and change from that sort of boring, dull head that you imagine in your mind. So how to draw the head, right? How to kind of start it. And a little bit about proportion, which is the most important one, like the biggest takeaway is those eyes being about halfway, which also applies a lot even again to something that's more animated. So if you drew a head, you're doing something that's a little bit more like manga or anime, you could still from the top to the bottom put those eyes about halfway. And of course, one of the main differences is they just are bigger, right? There's more scale, as we talked about last week. So eyes halfway, great rule. You know, if anything today, there's a lot of stuff we want to talk about, but if there's anything today you want to take away, it'd be that. Put those eyes halfway, or at least start them halfway, and then kind of play with it from there. Okay, now there are many different facial features, right? We're going to do this part actually kind of quickly, so we can check in real fast, say hi to everyone, and then we'll talk a little bit more about like color and stuff, and then we'll kind of put a little head together. So obviously there's tons of facial features. Let's just give you some really fast tips on the major ones, specifically the ones that like you see like on your face. So if we had to give a big tip from last week about eyes, to me, the biggest tip was that rhythm that we talked about. Short, long, long, short, right? So that's a really good tip for the shape of the eye. And keep in mind that you can do that even with something that's stylized. You can do that tall, kind of wide, more anime or manga inspired eye, and still use those ideas. Short, long, right? So that's a good tip for the feature of the eye. There is a handout that has like a bunch of ideas, like a bunch of options for these features. So you can always check that out later on the homework. For the nose, one thing that I like to teach, nose. One thing I like to teach, I actually just taught this yesterday to the other classes, something I call like the heart of the nose. So the heart of the nose. And what this is that when you're drawing a nose, especially from the front, a lot of students will do stuff like this. They'll kind of draw like an entire bridge. They'll draw like the nostrils. They kind of draw like every single shape of the nose. And what is kind of weird is like the nose is very physical. It's like very 3D, but we don't really see stuff like this. We don't see like these huge dark lines to like the bridge. So a better way to think about the nose is to think of this heart of the nose, which is draw your nostrils, which you could think of are almost kind of like a leaf, right? Kind of like almost a little leaf shape. Draw the nostril, draw what we call the wings of the nostril. So this is kind of like those brackets on the side. And then the shape we're looking for is, imagine like a really wide kind of heart, like that. And what you get is you have the leaf, the wings, draw that heart, and then give that a little bit of shade. And that's how you get like a really nice dimension to the nose. You're actually like showing the nose more through lighting than necessarily just like lines. So on a face, just like a regular face like this, it would look something like this: nostrils, wings, and then use a little shade for that heart. It'll give you some really nice dimension to that nose. I think that's more important than when you do aggressive moves like this. You try to draw like the entire bridge and everything. Show more of that depth through that lighting. Just like these shape ideas with the mouth. Let's show this real fast and then we'll take our little hello break. A mouth could just be a line. It's true. It could just be a straight line like that. If you want to go a little bit more realistic, you do want to think of this letter M shape for the mouth. And so what that looks like is, imagine a letter M that is really nice and spread out. And that's our lip line, right? Draw the letter M. You could draw some corners and then add that top lip. For me personally, especially if I'm drawing, I don't actually put a lot of bottom lip. Like I don't draw like a big line like this. Again, I don't do aggressive line work like that to try to make it look real. I care a lot more about that little shadow under the lips. It's kind of like the nose, right? It's more about the lighting that shows the idea. So even back here on this little example, big letter M, little bit of shade on the top lip, little shadow underneath the lips. As I says, that shadow is always so satisfying to add. Yes, it is. Yeah, it's true. It also plays into this thing that I won't talk about this in depth, but this idea of like what we call the zones, which is these, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, kind of like 6 abstract shapes that suddenly make a face, right? We'd say like, wow, why do these blobs look like a face? And it's because it's a lighting idea. You know, it's this lighting concept, and that's what that shadow really does. So tips on like making these shapes would be the short and long of the eyes, that heart of the nose, right? Give it that little bit of a heart shadow shape. And then finally that letter M for the mouth. And you do see a lot of stuff like this. It's extremely accurate in animation, even like manga and stuff, where you have that line that kind of like breaks a little bit, right? It has like that little gap in it. You should definitely do that. That's an extremely clever move in drawing. And what it's doing is it's showing us how this part kind of blends or overlaps. So that's why in animation and stuff, they leave that little line out. So I would definitely incorporate that. You'll see it on a lot of the examples, both on the handouts and even like over here, you see that little gap on there. So thousands of ways you could draw these features, of course, but when there are thousands of ways to draw something, that's where it's your job, even my job, right? Think of like the theory behind it. Find like the theory or the philosophy behind the shapes, and that way you can design a little bit better. Okay, so let's go ahead and check in with everyone real fast. We'll say hi, and then we'll get to our second part, which is a little bit more about color. So I'm actually just going to go kind of in order on the camera that I see here. We'll start with Zaya. Zaya, how's your day going?
It's been going very well. Yeah, I drew a little bit this morning, which was fun.
Awesome, very good. What's it, by the way, what's your time zone? Like what time is it over there right now?
Right now it's 2:30 p.m. I think it's Eastern or Central. It's one of those two.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Yeah, actually I think you'd be Eastern, I believe. Yeah, because it's 11:34 over here. So you're a little bit later. Very cool. Benson, how are you doing today, Benson? Are you doing well?
Yeah, I don't know why, but I just decided to just use the 3DS Notes app today.
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah, very cool.
I don't
Very
know why, but I did.
it's very
Um,
nostalgic of you, very old school of you. I like that.
yeah. Um, it it's like 1:30 for me, so
Oh, cool. Oh yeah, so you're central. You'd be central time.
yeah,
Very good.
yeah.
Nolan, how are you doing today, Nolan? You doing well?
I'm doing okay right now. It's just a day today.
There you go. It's just a day today. Nolan, you're in Austin, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, my old stomping grounds, my old home. It's a good spot. Let's go to thanks, Nolan. Let's go to Jalen. Jalen, how are you doing today? Yes.
I'm good.
Awesome. Do you have any questions so far?
No, I don't think so.
Right on. Let's go to Mia. Mia, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good.
Awesome. And Archie, I think Archie, you were in class yesterday as well, right? How are you doing today?
Yes, I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. Yeah, glad to see you in two art classes. Very cool. Archie, real fast, what's your program? What do you use for digital?
I use Procreate.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Yeah, I love Procreate. I would even use it for this class, but it's a little bit harder, I think, to like share on the screen and stuff. But yeah, it's a great program. I actually use it just as much as I use Photoshop, so it's very cool. Ryan, how you doing today? Ryan, you doing well?
Yeah, I'm good.
Do you have any questions so far?
Not so far.
Awesome. Thanks for checking in. And then let's wrap up with Soul. Speaking of two art classes, how you doing today, Soul?
I'm doing good.
Cool. Do you have any questions so far?
I do not.
Awesome. Thanks for checking in. Maddie, how you doing today, Maddie?
I'm good.
Awesome. Great to see you. Do you have any questions so far?
No.
Yeah, awesome. And then last but certainly not least, I think this is our last one. Let's go to LJ. How are you doing today? And LJ, you can type in the chat if you'd like. LJ says, I'm okay. Yeah, I know hope you're feeling a little bit better. And LJ says, no questions. Cool. Awesome. Thanks so much for checking in. Yeah, I know that my trademark, my signature would be like tossing a lot of info. You know, I want to make sure that in theory, when I'm talking and like going through a lot of stuff, it's because I want to give you a lot of information, but deep down, like on days like this in particular, just walk away with like one or two things. Like there's one or two facts or one or two ideas that really click with you, if it's just like the halfway point for eyes, things like that. That to me would be a pretty big success for a day like today. As we always say, we're just introing a lot of these ideas. These are like really, really complicated ideas. but we're just wanting to get you started on them, right? So speaking of, we actually have one more kind of like major idea that we'll show real quick. And this includes some new vocabulary. I throw some words out here and there, but these are some words we really want to get comfortable using. And then from there, we'll see like a little example, like here on the bottom. I'll probably just put together a very quick little head showing like all these ideas. And then at that point, we're getting down to the end of class. We'll check out our homework assignment. And again, we'll show some student homework. We'll show some ones from the previous term to show how some successful homework could look. Okay. So we're talking about drawing heads. And in fact, I'll very quickly put a little head together. So let's say we had, again, the ball where the figure's looking. We have our jaw. Let's put a little head together. I mentioned, again, you can be a little bit flatter on the sides. Here's a neck. Here's some ears. We'll just give ourselves some simple eyes. Simple nose. Here, we'll get some of these lines out of the way. So a simple eye, simple nose. Here's that little heart. A little mouth. And then I won't put any hair for now because we're just talking a little bit about color, specifically for skin. But just so you know, if you like the proportional stuff and you're into particularly like learning more about like how your human head, like your realistic head is proportioned, your hairline, like where your hair starts, an interesting parallel is it's actually just this, like about how tall your chin is, like your just normal realistic chin. That's about how far down you come to start your hairline. It's basically the same measurement. So we'll give this kind of like a short, almost like a shaved head idea. So one of the biggest motivations for all those like little proportion rules and ideas and things like that is you want to know those rules so that you can, of course, bend and manipulate them. Meaning like you can change them to be things that you want to design, right? As I said, it's like your template. Okay, so here's our little like basic head. So let's talk about skin tone and like skin color. Obviously, even with like avatar, blue people, etc., you can do whatever skin color you want. I could care less. But there is philosophy behind skin color that would be very important for you, particularly for realism. Again, to think about, start with realistic knowledge and break that knowledge for your characters and stuff like that. So it can be whatever you want, but we got to have some good theory. So examples of not good theory, largely, you'll see this broken, but not good theory would be stuff that is extremely vibrant, right? So especially like if we said, hey, I want you to draw like a human, and then we color it like this, or even like this. It's not bad in terms of like the theory that you're applying, but it's also not great. And what's going on is that when you pick those kinds of colors like this, or like this, or even something like this, in realism and in general in painting, these colors are what we'd call too saturated. And there are 3 vocabulary words that we want to use. And I will ask you these words, especially in critique. I'm going to tell you, I want you to describe this to me, describe your colors using these words. So anytime you pick a color, you have this color, you color pick it, you pick this skin tone, etc. There are 3 things that are changing within that. It's what's called the hue, saturation, and value. On all of your programs, whatever you're using, Procreate, Clip, Photoshop, Ibis, whatever, you actually have something on that program. It's going to look different. They will actually look like this. And it will usually have those 3 parameters, like those 3 ideas. So let's quiz real fast. And we'll actually start with Mia. Mia, do you know what the word hue means?
I believe hue is like where it would be on the, like you see the outer color wheel, like where it falls on that.
Yeah, that's a great answer. So Mia was saying like it's kind of like where it's falling on the color wheel, and that's a great answer. Hue is actually literally just a synonym, like a different word for color. That's it. So if I told you like, hey, what kind of hue did you use for the apple? You might say red or a green apple, right? What kind of hue is orange? You'd say it's literally orange, like an orange fruit, right? So hue is actually just a word for color. It's technically the easiest one we could say, the easiest like definition. Now the next one, let's actually ask Archie. Archie, do you know what value is in art?
I know what it means. I just forgot because I learned it before.
Yeah, do you have like a guess?
Is it like the texture of the art?
It's not, but that's a good guess because you're kind of thinking like, I wonder what the aspects of art are, and so you said texture. So it's not that, but I like that guess a lot. So value is actually the light and dark in art or in a color. So when we're asking you how light or dark is the skin tone or how light or dark is the color, the word we're using is value. And things have good and poor value, like strong and weak value, right? Where it's like the values in this artwork are not very good, they could be better. And then we say the value in this artwork is really nice, right? So as an example, in the homework, we'd say this character's hair color is a dark value, right? It's darker. And then we'd say their skin tone is kind of like a maybe middle value. We'd say like the white of their eye is a bright value. So it just means the light and dark. And for those of you that like to look at your programs and learn all this stuff, you will notice that on this little bar that you see sometimes that it also might say B, which just means black, like how black something is. And that's the same as value. So sometimes it's called like black on your program, but it just means like how light or dark it is. You can even see right now when you have like just a white color selected, it's showing you that the value of your color is 100% white, right? So yeah, value. Yeah, and Benson says also sometimes called brightness. Yeah, very good. So sometimes it can also refer to brightness. So it's actually funny enough, not like the color of anything, it's just how light or dark it is. That's why all three of these things involve a color. So hue, Mia said again, is just a color. That's the easiest one. Value, as we worked out with Archie, is the light and dark. And then the last one, let's actually ask Nolan. Nolan, what is saturation?
Saturations is where you mentioned this before. I'm trying to remember what it is because I use it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Saturation is where you blend the colors. Is that right?
Not quite. It would just be like a single color. Like a single color can have a certain saturation. So I'll give you a tiny example. Here's 1, 2, 3. These all have 3 different saturations. So what do you think that difference is?
You made them darker.
They are technically darker, but what's one more like word? Like is one like more pale than the other? Is one like a little bit deeper in color than the other, right?
Yeah.
And I'll give you one more quick hint. We're looking for a word it's really great. It starts with a V. Like what is changing across these colors that would start with the letter V? I'm gonna do like what is it, like Wheel of Fortune? I'll like slowly spell it out. And then you can say it when you think you know the word. We're almost at the end.
Yeah. Yeah,
right.
I can't remember the name.
No worries. It's yeah, good, very good. Right. I like Ryan put the little sparkles on it as well. It stands out. Yeah, it's very good. Vibrancy. I think I also saw Zaya squirming, knowing the answer potentially. So yeah, very good. Thank you, Nolan. So it's vibrancy. So the idea is that saturation. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Today is not my day today.
No worries, no worries. This is good. I mean, even like knowing these words before, that's why we say them over and over again. Yeah, the urge was strong. So yeah, saturation is how vibrant something is. So what we're actually saying up here when we said like don't color your character like orange or like hot pink. Again, you can do that. It's fun. There's cartoons, but deep down with realism, like don't make things so vibrant. Skin color is actually not that vibrant. Just like when we tell you to draw a tree, especially like if I said, hey, paint a tree for us or something, and people would do something like this. They'd be like, oh, well, here's a trunk, and then here's like, leaves, right? And that's that symbol idea, but we would actually say like, wow, man, that's like super saturated. That's like way too saturated of color. So instead, what we'd say is, you know what a tree actually looks like, even using those goofy shapes right there, is a real life tree would probably look something a little bit more like this. And honestly, even like less and less, right? Like even duller in real life, like when you go outside. So that's saturation. That's how vibrant something is. So the lesson here would be, there's 2 lessons to learn right now about skin. Paint any skin color you want. I don't care. But there's 2 lessons that you'll learn about it. One would be that when you pick a color for skin, especially to like start the conversation of it being realistic, you want to really avoid all this area right here, even like around here. This is extremely saturated color. It looks like this, like this, like this, like this. So what we want to say is that skin tone is not that saturated. It's going to look more like this. Oops, sorry, I'm going to go under it. It's going to look more like this. So that's what the handout says. Skin tones are slightly desaturated. And then your other big lesson about skin tone is that when you have your box of crayons or your markers, a lot of us genuinely kind of default to pink being like a skin tone. We think like, oh, skin, like my skin today or whatever's on my body, it changes day to day. It's going to be some form of like pink or like red. And you're not far off. And there's definitely like skin tones on your body that are pink or red, even like certain temperatures, right? But the truth would be that all skin tones, a very important lesson in skin tone, all skin tone is actually largely coming from the color orange. So up here, what I put is I put 2 people that have very different skin tones. And when you click the skin tone of the actress Tilda Swinton right on the left, and you click the skin tone of Idris Elba on the right, when you click these 2 skin tones and you color them, they look like this. And when you look at their what's called parent color, like what color are they coming from? Like what are they derived from? They are largely derived from the color orange. So orange is actually like the main color for all skin tone. So you could do a person that is really pale. You could do a person that is Caucasian, even with like tan skin. You could do a person that is deeper in color. And you can even do very deep skin tone. And all these colors came from the color orange, like just picking orange on my program, right? Whatever I'm using, and sliding it around this little box of orange. So the 2 takeaways about skin, when you give your character a skin tone, you give them like a color like this, is lay off the saturation. I mean, like, don't choose vibrant colors, and we'll call you out in critique, right? That's the point of critique, is to help and learn and correct ourselves. And in critique, when you choose this like neon color, we're going to go, wow, man, like that's fun, but that's super saturated. That's definitely not quite in the realm of realism. So watch the saturation. And if you are really going for something like this, which is what we really want to see in the homework, we want to see kind of like a more realistic head, or slightly realistic, right? Just show us your understanding of the human body. When you pick that skin color, again, go for orange as your base. Orange is a color that you can make so many different skin tones out of. And also, again, like really references our real life skin tone. Okay, so I see my time. I know we gotta get checking out of here in just a second. So let's look at these last handouts. Super fast review. Ball and jaw, right? How to start the head. The eyes being halfway, very important proportion for the head. A little bit about features, right? Like different tips for the features. I'll copy all this stuff and put it into the Teams chat. Let me put it in there real quick. So, how to draw the head. Good placement of the eyes on the head. Some quick tips about features, which can be, again, all over the place, some different stuff. And then finally, skin tone when you put that base color of skin on there. So what that looks like combined, again, like for your homework, we're going to make an extremely fast version of the homework, is that your homework is to draw us a head. And ideally, I would really like this to be an original head, meaning like you can pick up reference, I'll give you a prime example. I love a guy named Kwang Kim who does apparently he's a baseball player. He's also an artist. There we go. He does work for Studio Mir, which does Legend of Korra and stuff like that. So you can pick reference pictures, of course, of people you like. Just work on drawing your own head, of course, from that. So an example, I'd say, hey, I really like Kwang Kim. I think his work's great. So maybe when I draw my homework assignment, my homework head, I'm sort of referencing a character I saw Kwang Kim do. Maybe even with, I'd like you to draw an eye, but maybe with like the eye patch, right? So your homework idea is to draw an original head and use that basic flow that we did from last week. So we want to see you sketch it, ink it, and then add some flat color. We're actually still not really getting into shading or anything yet, so don't worry about stuff like that. Oh, very good. Yeah, I like all the recognition there. Yeah, Kwang Kim, again, very cool. Very, very cool artist. And then actually, Kwang is a person I study a lot for color. I love the way he colors, speaking of skin tone, right? I love his like skin tone colors like this. His shadow color is really nice. So I study a lot of his stuff. Quick little eye on there. So I'll show the process very, very quickly. So what we want to see is you draw or sketch, you ink it, and then add color and think about some of these colors that we talked about, right? Choose your skin tone. You can draw hair. We didn't talk about drawing hair specifically. We actually have a lesson on drawing hair, so we'll get to that pretty soon. But we want you to make, like the eye last week, one completed head that is drawn, colored, and contains, of course, some of the stuff that we're talking about, specifically the skin tone idea, the proportion of the head. That's why the question earlier, I think, was about, does it have to be human? We are definitely looking for like a little bit more human. Like we're testing a little bit of this proportion stuff we talked about. There's going to be definitely assignments where you could do something a little bit different, like more creative or like kind of more innovative in the figure. But yeah, we want to go for more like the human stuff for now. So there's some examples on the handouts of like, a simple head, right? All the way to something more realistic. There's some stuff on hair and on profile. We didn't get to that today. We'll probably talk about it on Thursday. And then we got to duck out of here. So let's look really quickly at some successful homework. So your homework assignment they have on the altitude card is to draw a head and use some of these ideas, specifically again, like skin tone and stuff. So successful homework would be something as kind of like towards realism as this. Like, so here's an example of a student who did realism, put some skin tone on there. This is a little bit more stylized, or in fact, a lot more stylized, but definitely uses some really nice stuff regarding skin tone choice as well as the layers, right? Showing like the workflow. And then here's kind of like an in-between where there's definitely like a lot of style in this drawing, but I do appreciate, again, a good skin tone, good use of some of the stuff we talked about, even for like shapes for features. And you can see that this one's actually referenced from a picture and then the student kind of riffed on it, as we say, which is definitely what we want to see. We don't want to see like, trace overs, paint overs, any junk like that. We want to see you do a nice original drawing. Let me very quickly cut to the altitude card. And then of course we'll be on our way. So here we go. So the altitude card has been assigned. I think it's already assigned. Yeah, it is. Okay, cool. Let me double check. Yeah, it is. Okay. So to wrap it all up, here's all the handouts on the bottom. Here's an example, right? And so to wrap up everything we said today, here it is. It says create one drawing of a character head. Use that basic workflow from last time. So meaning use that idea of like sketch it out, ink it, and then add color. We're saying here your character should be an original design. Do not directly copy or trace a piece of artwork. So if you have a character that you like, you generally can like do kind of like a version of that character, but again, no tracing, no paint overs. Please don't do any of that trash. One character head. And then we do want to add on here, because we did it last time too, include a screenshot of your layers. So I really like seeing that process of like how you develop the layers. If you have any questions, not only can you ask me, but there is a video on there. You can click on the video and it shows the whole process from start to finish. So for the homework assignment that you see there, you can always scrub through and see some examples of how it's built up. Oh, and Jalen says, happy birthday, Maddie. Awesome, Maddie. Happy birthday. That's great to hear. Congrats. Hope you have a good day. Friday's a good day to have a birthday. It is Friday, right? Yeah, it is Friday. Cool. That's a great day to have a birthday. Go right into the weekend. Okay, so there's your homework assignment. Big lesson today. Hope you guys did well with it. If you have any questions, of course, let me know. Otherwise, it's assigned. Work on it, of course. We'll meet back next week. Check out what you did. And I look forward to seeing your work. If you have a picture that you want to use, or like, hey, could I use this character or something? Shoot it to me on Teams. That way we can check it out and see if it's cool for you. But yeah, have a great Friday. Have a great weekend. I will see you guys next week. See ya. Bye, guys. Take care. Thank you. Take care.